worked with Dr. Asim Zia and Bindu and our whole team informing in Twin Transboundary Water and Cooperation Network, and also working with the Environmental Peacebuilding Institute to make these sessions happen. So Claire.
Hello, everyone. I'm Claire Doyle. I'm an environmental peacebuilding volunteer with the Environmental Law Institute, and I'm also just here to support the event as part of the Road to Geneva specifically.
Okay, thank you. Harriet?
Hi, I'm also an environmental peacebuilding volunteer, and I'm Claire is showing me the ropes on what to do on the Road to Geneva series.
Great, thank you. Is it Eric at the Environmental Law? I'm not seeing a name for the Environmental Law Institute. Is that the?
Sorry, I'll change that. It's Carl Brook.
Carl, I'm sorry, Carl.
Special programs at the Environmental Law Institute, and I'm president of the Environmental Peacebuilding Association. Have a variety of things that we're working on, including conflict-sensitive conservation, how to do monitoring and evaluation, and addressing the green resource curse in Africa.
Great, thank you so much, Carl. Richard.
Hi, I'm Richard Friend. I'm an associate professor at the University of York in the UK, and I've been working with colleagues in the Mekong. Dr. Sin is on the call, and colleagues in Israel and Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you. Saeed.
Hello, everyone. I'm Saeed Akhtar Khan from Pakistan. I'm a doctoral candidate at University of Bayreuth, researching natural hazards and human migration in Eastern Hindu Kush.
Thank you. Richard Carroll.
Hello, I'm Richard Carroll. I've retired from the World Wildlife Fund, where I was the vice president for Africa for 35 years. Currently on the board of Go Conscious Earth, which takes me back into the Congo in a very important area. But with World Wildlife Fund, like I said, I covered the Congo Basin, and we initiated a large landscape level program across the Congo Basin, including the landscape where Go Conscious Earth is currently working. And I'd love to tell you about that as we go along.
Thank you. Bach.
Good evening to everybody. My name is Bach Tan Singh, coming from Hanoi. I'm working right now at the Vietnam Institute for Science Technology, Science Technology and Innovation, but I used to work for the National Institute for Science Technology Policy and Strategic Study, NISPAS. But NISPAS now became one of the member of the broader agency called VISTI, as the Vietnam Institute for Science Technology and Innovation. Recently, I have been working in the Mekong region, especially with Dr. Richard Friend, and we're working on the governance of water resources. But most recently, I'm working on climate risk communication in the Mekong. Nice meeting you.
Thank you. Nice meeting you as well. Nisar.
Thank you, Susan. This is Nisar Maiman, chairman of Pakistan's Water Environment Forum, based in Islamabad, focused on the climate change and on the Indus Basin fundamentally. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna.
Donna Rizzo. I'm at the Civil Environmental Engineering Department at the University of Vermont, and I've worked in the environmental arena for about 30 years, mostly on the computational side of things and optimization and modeling and site characterization. And I'm really happy to be here. It's good to see you, Susan.
Thank you, Donna. Stephen.
Good morning. Sorry if I'm frozen. I just transferred over to a PC. I'm Stephen. I'm a PhD student in Vermont, University of Vermont under Asim Zia, and I'll be working on responsible innovation. And my background is social neuroscience.
Thank you. Gemma.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gemma Del Rossi. I'm currently a master's student at Cornell University studying environmental economics, and specifically the social cost of water pollution. I've also been a research assistant and still am a research assistant for Dr. Asim Zia, and I'm very happy to be here today. It's nice seeing everyone.
Thank you. Rubana.
Hi, sorry I'm not on video, but I'm Rubena Anjum. I'm an incoming doctoral student at UVM in the Sustainable Development Program, and I'll be studying with Dr. Asim Zia. My background is broadly like climate change and development, and most recently I've been working on greenhouse gas accounting and climate resilience.
Thank you. Caitlin.
My name is Caitlin Waddick. I work with Asim Zia and Susan and the others. I'm interested in pollution prevention and cooperative development. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeff.
Good morning, speaking from Montreal. I practice negotiation, processes mediations. I've been soil and water technician. I have an interest or a couple decades of emergency responses to natural disasters and have worked globally in this fashion capacity and contingency building. So I'm open to learning and thank you for listening.
Thank you. Sandra.
I am Sandra Mechens. I am a PhD candidate from Wageningen University in the Netherlands, but I am also working with the Ecuadorian organization, the Pacific International Center for Disaster Risk Reduction. My focus interest is from transboundary waters and water governance for disaster risk.
Thank you. Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Glantz at the University of Colorado, and I'm on the edge of retiring at 81, 82, I guess. And I'm a social scientist, started with decolonization, visiting wars in Africa back in the 1960s. And then I flipped over to climate in the early 70s. I just happened to be there when the climate was changing, but they weren't sure which way, cooling, warming. I've worked in most continents, and I'm a social scientist, which is actually a reformed political scientist. And my latest effort has been around the Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. That's my latest book, and I work a lot on El Nino and droughts and floods and various things over the decades.
Thank you. We really look forward to hearing more from you soon. Dr. Mohanty.
Hi, everyone. This is Professor Asutosh. I am working as a professor in Madhyanchal University. Before I was associate with EC Mode for 4 years. So across the Hindu Kush Himalaya, I'm working. I'm one of the product of Michael Grange is here. So it is very interesting for me, like from where I learned my background, my career in with Michael Grange. So it's very privilege for me to associate all of these things. And my specialization is the Hindu Kush Himalaya, disaster risk reduction and climate change. So basically I work presently several river basins, particularly Indus. I'm working already work in Amudarya and Ganges as well as Brahmaputra. So it is very honor for me to associate and contribute from my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ben.
Hello, everyone. My name is Benjamin Ryan. I'm currently a master's candidate at the University of Vermont under Asim Zia, and I'm looking at performance-based payment for ecosystem services focused on watershed management.
Thank you. Takis?
Hello, everyone. I'm Takis Economou. I'm a postdoctoral associate at the University of Vermont, working under Asim Zia and Donna Rizzo. In a project here we have, but relevant to this group, I'm working with Asim Zia in a GLAF2 project in Upper Indus, as well as a UNEP report about big data and frontier technologies for environmental peace building.
Thank you. Clive.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, my time. It's great to be here on the second session. Was it something specific, Susan, I was asked to say?
No, just a very brief introduction.
Okay, so I'm Clive from the Arab Institute in Israel, and I serve as the director of the Center for Transboundary Water Management. And together with many here on the call, I'm a member of the Twin Network and other joint initiatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Schaefer.
Hi, good morning. I'm Michael Schaefer, an assistant professor at New Mexico Tech, but I'm here over in California currently. So, good morning.
Thank you. Now I'm going to my second screen to make sure. Larry?
Yes, good morning from low bandwidth rural Nova Scotia. Nice to see most of you again. I'm Larry Swadek. I'm at the University of Waterloo. I have a cross appointment at the University of Western Cape in South Africa at the Institute of Water Studies. And for about 30 years, I've worked on questions of environmental peace building, freshwater governance and management with a focus primarily on Southern Africa.
Thank you. Alicia.
I'm working with Mara Tignino in Geneva Water Hub here close to Geneva. I'm a chemical engineer and I work with her in a master thesis based in the Indus water treaters, and also the current link with climate change in UNIGE, University of Geneva. I'm also responsible health, safety, environment in a town hall close to Geneva in the French side. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is it Neda Durrani?
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's Neda from Pakistan. And I'm a PhD and now currently working as assistant professor at University of Sawabi. Previously, I worked with Environmental Protection Agency in different sectors, and my research area is the toxicology and risk assessment associated with the heavy metal contamination.
Okay.
And dioxins, and currently in this water in the Swabi district, even today I have collected some surface water and sediments from the Indus River.
Thank you very much, Neda. Liliana?
Hello, everyone. I'm Luciana Pimentel. I'm from Brazil. I work at my federal government in Water Security National Secretariat. And my focus is on conflict prevention over water issues in Latin America. I'm a member of EnPAx and the co-chair of the Water Interest Group. So nice to be here with you all.
Thank you. And Mohammed Bashi? Mohammed, we're having a hard time with your internet connection. Oh, if you can, why don't you put your intro into the chat? Right, we're having a hard time getting you. Why don't you put your introduction in the chat?
To everyone, this is Mohammed Bashir.
Yeah, we're having.
I'm director for Quad.
Okay, Mohammed, I think.
Can you hear me now? Okay, this is Mohammed Bashir.
No, still a bad connection. You might want to leave and come back and try again. And definitely.
He's calling from Afghanistan. Mohammed Bashir is calling from Kabul, Afghanistan. I'm sorry that he cannot hear you, but that speaks to the disparities.
Bashir, wait for.
Okay, Mohammed, so sorry. Try again, but if you can, put your information into the chat. And thank you so much for trying to come in from Afghanistan.
War in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. Okay, I think Asim, anyway, first I just wanted to say what an amazing international group of people. And so thank you all so much for coming. It's really a privilege to be able to have so many people from so many parts of the world and that we're able to communicate with each other right now. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Asim to introduce Bindu, which I purposefully was not introducing Bindu because I know she's going to do a recap for us and she can do a little introduction before. And so Asim, I'll turn it over to you if you wanted to say just a word or two before we turn it over to Bindu.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for joining us. And in continuation of the last meeting, Bindu is going to provide us a recap. We have been working on the white paper. That was the Google draft. And, I saw many people contributed and Stefan and Ben are helping me to continue in a live way, keep adding the comments, reconciling the comments, but we're also taking the transcriptions from our meeting and adding that content that we're talking in the meeting in the white paper as well. So all the ideas are comprehensively covered, as well as the chats. So please feel free to add your comments into the chat as well as we talk or questions and answers. And also the people who are in the YouTube channel. So with that, Bindu is an Associate Director of Institute for Environmental Diplomacy and Security. She's been a founding member of the Transboundary Water and Cooperation Network and currently serving as Assistant Professor in Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources at University of Vermont. So it's really been a great privilege to work with her. Bindu, would you please provide the recap? It's going to be about 10 minutes recap, and then we're going to have Ignite Key Talk with Mickey Glantz on our Highlands to Oceans initiative to set the context for the science diplomacy discussions that we want to have. I'm really thankful to Mickey as well for joining us so early in the morning. But Bindu, please, floor is yours.
Great. Good morning, everyone from Burlington, Vermont. Thanks for the introduction, Asim, and also nice to see everyone back on our second forum on water cooperation and environmental peace-building strategies across Indus, Jordan, Mekong, and the Amazon basin. So last week, we specifically explored opportunities and challenges for public diplomacy and community action. So I will summarize some of the key points and perhaps that can also inform our discussions today on opportunities and challenges for science diplomacy. So just a recap on the workshop itself. Our basic premise is that the world's freshwater resources are rapidly deteriorating due to complex set of drivers. I don't really need to go into all the different factors, but these factors are limiting access to clean water and intensifying famine, transboundary conflicts, migration, and resulting in water wars. And the ability to meet communities' need for clean water depends on building the capacity of communities for cooperative, collaborative, informed, sustainable management and governance of water at the river basin scale. So the approach has been that water shared across political boundaries can be a powerful avenue for peace building. And so empowering local communities to conserve ecosystem services and co-designing water pollution mitigation solutions can be, a sustainable means of addressing some of these issues that we're dealing with. So the conversations have ranged around building track 2 and track 3 environmental diplomacy solutions, and also to build local capacity to initiate, ecological cooperation among, all the different stakeholders that we are working with. The major river basins that we've been focusing on are, of course, the Indus Basin, the Jordan, the Mekong, and the Amazon Basin. Our long-term goal is environmental peace building and water cooperation measures in these focal basins, with the clear objective of ensuring availability of clean water for about over 500 million people that these regions are serving. So to go into some of the questions that we discussed last week, the first question that we had on the agenda last week was to talk about what are the current challenges and anticipated problems with regards to access to provision of fresh, clean water in the focal river basin. So mostly, what are the basic challenges? Because we had, presentations last week from Clive and Richard, they actually addressed some of these challenges in their presentation. Also, Dr. Zia also did, give a brief overview of some of the challenges that we are facing. So we really did not have a wider discussion on this first question, but we started our discussion mostly with a second one. But it would be great to get input on key challenges to fresh, clean water in the focal river basins. You can add your feedback on the Google Docs. So, because that would help us to build a white paper, especially a regional focus would be really good. But in general, some of the challenges that we discussed, that were common to all the basins were governance challenges, challenges related to climate change, challenges related to dumping of waste, industrial effluents were some of the key things. Then we also talked about some of the challenges in specific regions like Mekong. We discussed about impacts of hydropower development, agriculture, fisheries, and aquaculture, and also, hydropower impacts on fisheries and impacts on livelihoods. We also talked about some real tensions about data sharing between, member states within this context in Mekong. Also, challenges with lack of knowledge and experience in local settings, lack of community access to knowledge and data, lack of understanding of scholarly data. So some research translation issues were brought up as one of the issues to pay attention to. I think it's Liliana who, filled this white paper section quite a bit and talked about the challenges in the Amazon River Basin, which range from deforestation, construction of dams, mining, and inefficient sanitation services were especially key issues that were brought up, in addition to biodiversity loss and water pollution from other socio-environmental conflicts. But deforestation in Amazon region, especially has intensified, and it's impacting, how the rainfall and deepening water crisis in Brazil, but also impacting other countries like Bolivia, Paraguay, Argentina, and so on. and also brought up pollution related to mercury from illegal mining, which is an important issue, which is also threatening the health of some of the people in the region. So mapping these projects and registering the results could go a long way in actually addressing some of these issues. I'm just going to go into the second question now for lack of time. This was the question that was, we discussed quite a bit, in last week. So the question is, what is being done and what are the opportunities for community-based action to mitigate the sources of water pollution and facilitate access to clean water? I'm not going to be able to cover everything that was discussed in this, on this particular question, but some key things were, I want to highlight some of the key things that we discussed, which include, focusing on regional approaches based on regional hazards and localized solutions. Some highlighted the need for a watershed basin-based framing, livelihood-relevant framing, need for capacity building, coalition building, trust building, and integrated coordination and community-based planning. And also all of this to enhance, the knowledge exchange. So to begin with, in regional approaches, some of the things that we talked about is that each region may have, its own unique issues and challenges to address, and local and culturally appropriate, solutions need to be considered in dealing with some of the regional challenges. So for example, one quote is that the relation of the Amazon people with the rivers is different than seen on other shared basins in South America, such as the La Plata River. So it has to be understood as that, and may require not the same solutions. As an example, recently some NGOs and civil society organizations made an effort to build septic systems for each family in a small community where better solutions could be a community system. That kind of a project just reproduces the logic most appropriated to urban areas into the core of the forest. This should be better discussed and evaluated. So it's just highlighting the need for solutions to come from the ground up and engaging communities and building solutions rather than kind of, instituting solutions from other places to, these really vulnerable regions, because that's has its own challenges and might not likely succeed. In some cases, also local solutions already exist, so we don't have to find it. In Amazon, there are already technology or knowledge of possible local solutions for improving sanitation, but the discontinuity of governmental projects and lack of investment are impacting access to basic sanitation services. And people are affected by this, at times resulting in death in some regions. And there needs to be a cross data analysis or collection at the regional level that reflects real cooperative effort among the countries. So local NGOs are actually doing several of these projects in some defined areas, but it's not sufficient oftentimes. The other approach, apart from the regional, was the watershed basin-based framing. which can integrate village research into broader scientific knowledge networks and vice versa. We also talked about the need to focus on livelihood relevant framing for messaging of multi-spatial and multi-sectoral challenges. You know, what is important to individuals and what is important to communities that need to be highlighted. We also talked about briefly about the need for capacity building. We have to build the unique cultural capacity, engage different kinds of knowledge forms, elevate indigenous knowledges, vernacular knowledges, and traditional knowledges, and that grassroots ground up approach is really important in finding real solutions. Some existing community-based planning efforts are already doing some good programs on the ground that are working excellently. But also, there is so much good work already being done by a lot of NGOs, governmental organizations, and community groups, but often we're not coordinated. People are just in their own kind of path. And I think one of the real challenges is getting people together cooperatively. A dialogue happening between all of these different groups with the larger vision of the watershed, like understanding the watershed that everyone is in, and that we all need each other to keep the water clean. How we approach maybe the whole river basins as opposed to just everybody, you know, on their own path could be an, you know, important thing to address. Hence, you know, a network approach and finding means to connect people working on these issues are important. And often just isolated NGOs have a very localized approach, and it misses the links to, you know, district, regional, national, international levels of, you know, possibilities for networking and coordinating and furthering this issue of, you know, protecting our water resources.
In a couple of minutes, we have to move on to Nikki. So,
okay, so the other key issue that was raised is that of trust building. The question of trust is very important. How do you trust and who do you not trust? How do you build trust in the long run? You know, just like vaccines is a very critical question. So the knowledge and best practice sharing on water management among communities living upland and lowland will create a sense of shared responsibility and address trust issues. There were also you know, talks about how states can behave like elephants and civil societies are generally like suffering grass, which are kind of like trampled on. But at the same time, issues related to trust can be highly motivating and energizing to build these kind of projects. The last one I wanted to talk about was the need for knowledge exchange. To set up, everyone talked about the need for a platform for connecting scientific, local, and community knowledge and research. So the platform or the network for local committee for civil society can exchange knowledge information with other liberal charter and share, you know, education and knowledge on how to take care of water resources on your land and how to change your behavior and make sure the clean water is available. So the other, you know, need for better monitoring and predicting system, early warning systems, need for early warning systems was definitely talked about. We have to, another quote that I wanted to end with is that we have to figure out a way to set up a platform that's not only just for the knowledge dissemination, but where they can interact to weigh mechanism with each of those networks. The platform could, in a dynamic way, have a two-way discussion. I think that's the only way that we could move this forward. Otherwise, because of many of these people do not have the capacity to go online and read, what's written on the knowledge platform, say on an online platform, might not be sufficient. How do we engage them in a real way if they learn that their actions can have an effect? So that kind of a feedback would really help. I see a huge role for community science in furthering this. So improve databases by involving and preparing community-based data collection is key to fully understand the particular needs of each group and tailoring solutions to different realities in the larger rural basin. So I'll end my summary here, and I hope this was useful for our conversations for today.
Bindu, thank you so much. So shared responsibility, interactive knowledge platforms, trust building exercises at community scale. These are all like major highlights. And I think we're running a little bit behind, so I'm just gonna like quickly introduce Mickey because Dr. Michael Glantz introduced himself earlier on. It's my privilege to, and really I'm grateful that he's able to make this meeting. And I think somebody. I had the privilege to be working with Dr. Mickey Glantz at National Center for Atmospheric Research. He was my postdoc mentor, and since then he's been a collaborator on a variety of projects, most recently at Linear Ready Nations. Also, we've been talking about Belt and Road Initiative. Mickey's going to talk about Highlands to Oceans Initiative. That is kind of like framing our science diplomacy work that we've been talking about here under building the cooperation. So Mickey Glantz launched that initiative in late 90s, early 2000s, and I thought that he could really provide the historical context of this initiative because there is a lot of history behind that in 20th century research in earth system sciences and political sciences that Mickey has kind of like accumulated over the years, has been working on. And then I'll set the stage by just very brief introduction on our ongoing Highlands to Oceans project and cooperative efforts. So Mickey, thank you so much, and floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen. I decided the topic is so broad and interesting, and I touched on parts of it. I had to focus, so I brought myself back with some slides, which might sound a bit eclectic. I tried to make it a theme. You'll see. Okay. You can cut me off. I don't want to do a core dump because I have a lot of things I want to say. Okay. If I'm running too far, you let me know. Okay, I'll try to.
Yeah, and that sounds great. And as you're hearing Mickey, please add your questions and comments on the chat. Mickey, please go ahead.
And also on this first screen, you'll see my email. I answer all emails within about 3 hours. Test it. Okay. Let me see how I get my screen up here. Hold on. Wait a minute. Where am I? Give me a second. How do I get my screen up there?
There should just be a share screen button along the bottom.
Yeah, but what I want to do is put my PowerPoint on this screen. It is here, there, okay, and then I hit there. Is that it?
Yeah.
There we go.
You can put it in.
All right, now I'm going to go into, okay, I'm going to do the talk mode. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So there are more words than I usually use in this thing. Hold on. I've got to go back to the beginning. Okay. I don't know what's going on, but I can't get to slide 1. End slideshow.
Probably you want to.
I got it. I know what I know what I have to do, I think.
Yeah.
All right. I'll try not to talk faster. That's the tendency when you have a lot to do. Okay. So this is just what I call the H2O, Highland Highlands to Oceans initiative. I use it for mountains. I did some mountain research in the last decade. And there are my contacts at below, which you guys will now have. My initial concern for H2O, the idea of highlands to ocean, I got it from a report of a small river basin in New Jersey, where they use the phrase highland to ocean to look at environmental issues. And I thought it's important to look at this. Wait a minute, this is not going back to my, how do I get back to the original first? There, okay. That should work. All right, let me go to the next one. Okay, Highlanders are this looks like they're out of order, but anyway. Highlanders are the keepers of the water towers. That's how I looked at it. When I look at Central Asia or Asia in general, I think it's 11 or 12 of the world's major rivers come out of the Qinghai Tibetan Plateau. Okay, and the Indus, the Mekong, etc. Many rivers that bring water to about 2 billion people. Okay, it's kind of interesting. The lowlanders need their water. Lowlanders' water is a potential hostage to highlanders. And there's a difference between those communities, which I'll talk about in a bit. The goal was to foster cooperation now between highlanders and lowlanders to avoid conflict in the future, foster better relations between highlanders and lowlanders. Now, at different river basins, sometimes the highlanders have the upper hand, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan. Sometimes it's the lowlanders that have the upper hand because they have the money and they have the political power, etc. So there is an imbalance. And what I originally thought of was that eventually with climate change, there's going to be a lot of moving of people. And I'll get to that in a minute. So I wanted to remind, because I know there are younger people, in their 70s, 60s, 50s who are going to be listening now. So I thought I would remind them of this 1971 MIT study that is almost impossible to find now. It's called a Report on the Study of Man's Impact on Climate. And here's a couple quotes I plucked out. We recognize a real problem, a global temperature increase produced by man's injection of heat and CO2. Okay, 1971. This exercise would be fruitless if we did not believe that society would be rational when faced with the set of decisions that could govern the future habitability of the planet. Well, we know how well that's working out right now as we hesitate to do anything significant about global warming. So there's no place on the planet to escape from global warming. Now, this is a model that I like to use. I guess this is blocking. Is the picture blocking you? Oh, wait a minute. Let me get rid of that. All right. So this is the model. It's a beautiful model. If you could marry a model, a computer model, this would be the model I would marry. It's gorgeous. It's got everything in it, clouds, water. It's the climate system. And this is how they modeled it in 2000 by the US. However, it's wrong. What's wrong with it? No people. We are now and part of the climate system, not apart from it. And we have to accept that. They have to. The models are including it. But before recently, whether it's a decade or 2 or 3 ago, we were an input. We were an output. Things were coming into this black box, that's climate system, and things were coming out. People put things in, people were affected by it. Who cared? There are some really horrific early studies that were done that don't really bring the people into this thing. Right. So I also want to draw attention to the ecosystem, to the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was 2000 or so to 2005. And it was the counterpart for ecosystems to the IPCC. Less money, a lot of expertise went into various ecosystems, 9, I believe. I worked on the arid land stuff. But this is what I think is important. Ecosystem goods and services, great idea for societal well-being. That's the report. But it's like clapping with one hand. Actually, it should also have included or put first was human goods and services for ecosystem well-being. We have to take care of them. The ecosystems aren't worried about us. We should be worried about them because they supply us with all our needs. Okay, so that's clapping with two hands. You must look at it from both perspectives. Otherwise, if you put a number on as in the US, they find out it's cheaper to drain a swamp and build a hotel. It's more profitable in the future than saving whatever lives in a swamp, you know, or bird flyovers or whatever. All right. A climate change scenario for highlands to lowlands. Warmer ambient temperatures are creeping upslope. It's one of the things, I don't care what anyone says about, oh, climate change is not happening. You know, the Arctic is melting, the ice is melting, warm ecosystems are moving upslope. There are several things that are definitely climate change on a global scale. Glaciers melting 96% around the globe, et cetera. Warm ecosystems are moving upslope. People and animals and human activities will start moving upslope as things change because seasonality is changing. And one of the things we forget about is seasonality. Everything we do in life is around the seasons, not just, oh, it's fall, let's do this. It's the changing of the seasons. And we have to take seasonality and put it back in the equation. We have to readjust. We have a football season, a baseball season, et cetera. Once you go indoors, the weather is not important. Lowland people are going to move upslope. Glaciers are going to melt. More water in the streams at times we don't expect. You know, it's going to change the way we deal with things. There are many examples where highlanders have built dams and altered the seasonality for agriculture downstream. So in Portugal, they have to wait a few extra weeks before they get water if Spain decides to release it. I mean, it's really interesting. Water quantity in streams will increase. Highland ecosystems will change. Highlanders will move down as they no longer, as they can, you know, stay all year round with their livestock and find new ways to use the land. The lowlanders can move upstream now because they have this phrase. There's an American phrase called money moves uphill toward water. Okay, I'm sorry, water moves uphill towards money, and the lowlanders have the money and the highlanders don't. Okay, and there is room there for cooperation. I can't get rid of the pictures. Oh, maybe that's it. Okay, so what that brought me to is this invisible boundary of concern. Looking to the future, as the climate continues to change, you're going to have people moving down, people moving up, money moving up, and in between the highlands and the lowlands is the midlands, where there also are people, but they're going to conflict there. And I think we can avoid those conflicts now by playing the scenarios of what is actually starting to happen slowly and incrementally. People creeping up the upslope as the ecosystems do, and creeping downslope from the top. Okay. I don't know what happened. Let me see. Okay, so these are creeping environmental problems. I like to use this phrase, and I've used it for a long time. Some places starting to take hold. But creeping environmental problems involve human activities. Almost every environmental problem is a creeping one, except for a nuclear, malfunction, nuclear failures, nuclear power failure. They are long-term, low-grade, cumulative. So today's like yesterday, tomorrow's like today. I'm not going to do anything. Water quality is a little worse today than yesterday. Well, it didn't kill me yesterday, so I'm not worried. But eventually it turns into a crisis. And that's when the attention is being captured to the issue. But it's costlier to respond to the crisis than it is to say, wait a minute, all of these problems are slowly changing. It's a few bucks to fix it now, or a lot of bucks to fix it later. So that's the creeping environmental change problem, whether it's water quality, water quantity, you name it, air pollution, desertification, acid rain, every one of these things. Why care about the changes? Because every environments everywhere are changing, and it always involves people. Okay, and the bureaucracies are like the rabbit and the hare or the tortoise. The tortoise is the creeper that's going to win the race because the rabbit is lazy. The rabbit moves slowly. The rabbit thinks it's going to win and can control the problem. It's the bureaucracy. It doesn't work well. Okay. Now, H2O, we'll look at the image. I think, yeah, watch the image, okay? It's changing and it shows the glaciers receding, okay? And this is why it's important to look ahead, not just look at now or not just look back. And this just depicts how the ecosystems are changing and moving in the lowlands as well as the highlands, okay? This is a reminder for people, again, younger people. This was a 1970s, 71 actually, Barry Commoner's 4 laws of ecology. Everything is connected to everything else. Everything has to go somewhere. There's no such place as a way. If I take a piece of paper and throw it on the floor, I didn't throw it away. I threw it over there on the floor. Someone has to pick it up and put it somewhere, and someone has to do something with that. Everything is always changing. That includes the climate. Naturally, however, now anthropogenic activities are accelerating that. There's no free lunch. Somebody is paying somewhere. This is a Tibetan image. I believe it's Tibet. Not positive. No, this one is in Tibet. But anyway, you can see the water is totally polluted. Okay, so that's the slogan about American water flows uphill towards money. Now, a mountain is a cascade of goods and services, okay? So I talk highlands to lowlands, okay? Highlands, mountains to ocean. But if you follow the river course, there you can separate them because of climate and geology or whatever factors, social factors as well. So what you do have, you can divide arbitrarily a mountain ecosystem, mountain oceans, into 3 input-output feedback loops. Okay, 1 for the highlands, 1 for the midlands, and 1 for the lowlands. The output of the highlands becomes input to the midlands. Output of the midlands becomes input to the lowlands. So anything they do bad upstream will get to you downstream, okay? And I'm including in this, when I say oceans, I also include inland drainage bases. So I don't want to take cold to Newcastle because you know this stuff and time's fleeting, but I'm saying think inside the mountain box. But what box? There's an environmental box, and these are just some examples. You will have this PowerPoint. I mean, Asim will have it now, and you can look at it again and go deeper. Write me if with any questions you might have. Okay, so think inside the mountain box. And then there's the societal mountain box, and that is widespread poverty, indigenous knowledge loss, demands for water and other natural resources, expanding tourism, etc. So you can see these. I highlight food insecurity and the growing demands for water and other natural resources as the climate changes. Okay, so you have to think inside the mountain box. You also have to think outside the mountain box. And that came to me again when I heard the overview that we're focused on some river basins, Indus, Jordan, Amazon, Mekong. However, I think there should be, like in a baseball team, they always have an extra player who can fill in almost anywhere. And he sits on the bench and waits while the others play the game. I think it might be considered that there be someone who looks at other major basin research for findings, for their findings and their lessons learned that could be imported. Just have someone do that. So you're focused on these, but really you're broader than just these 4 basins. These happen to be the closest ones. So interdependency is real among social, political, economic interests of highland, midland, and lowland coastal communities. And the idea is think outside the box. The only thing you definitely do not want thinking outside the box is a cat and a litter box. You want him to use the box. All right, here's the mountain that I divided, and it gives you just, it's all suggestive. And it's about Asia, and it's the tourism at the highest ends and certain things. You'll see pastoralism and mining in the middle, which gives you acids and other minerals that go into the water system. Traditional irrigation, which is where your lowlanders will start using water, buying land that was not so interesting before. And they'll be bumping into other cultural groups that have lived with the existing previous climate. And then there's hydroelectricity, large-scale irrigation projects, et cetera. So you see that you've got to look at the highlands in a different way, not just the highlands and the lowlands. There's a lot going on in between. Wow. And this is, I guess, the key point that I try to make is, in the name of social and economic equity, mountain and highlands people deserve assistance in reaching their basic development needs. Okay, the capital city may be in the lowlands, but they're exploiting the highlands and hope that the hopes that the water will stay clear and be available to down below in the lowlands. They've got to give them something for their goods and services. Challenges, arguably the mountain communities of Central Asia are more sensitive to social, political, environmental changes than our lowlands. And that may be generally true where the highlands are poorer than the lowlands in other river basins. And this was my idea, as I said at the beginning, to make visible the invisible boundary for future zones of conflict along the highlands to oceans watercourses of interest, but not only between countries, but within countries. We tried to do this for Peru, for example. We didn't get awarded the project, but the idea was that, you know, if you can't do it within your country, it's hard to get you to convince a neighboring country to do what is the right thing on sharing water resources, cleaning water resources, etc. This is the last slide. Martin Price was a grad student with me a long, long time ago, ages. He's very prominent in geography, mountain geography. But here's that point, mountain reciprocity. Lowland people have vital needs for the resources of the mountains and highlands, and should compensate and work with them to ensure long-term provision of these resources with benefits to both communities. And also, mountain restitution is establish their rights to be compensated for goods and services they don't use, but they they contribute to the downstream flow, and compensatory mechanisms, funding, education, give them royalties, downstream profits of the crops grown in the lowlands, something for letting that water flow. And the H2O picture was by accident. I came across a bar in Las Vegas and it was H2O. So I took the photo. Anyway, I'm back. That's the talk.
Mickey, thank you very much. Really appreciate this.
I hope it wasn't too fast.
No, this was great. So we have like time for a couple of questions, and I see like Hop has, by the way, Hop, she's joined from Vietnam. Hop has asked you a question like, thank you, Mickey, for your presentation. I wonder how could we bring stakeholders together to negotiate about the water conflicts. Hop, maybe you want to ask yourself, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes. Hello, Mickey. Thank
Hi,
you
Hop.
for your presentation.
Thanks.
Yeah, I enjoyed a lot. Actually, I read your paper on the forecast hesitancy, and I also read several papers related to the ecosystem evaluation. So I just wondered that people usually talk about how can we bring stakeholders together to negotiate to reduce the potential conflict. on the water use. But how if the scientists have already need to bring more data to the table, or if the governors need to work together to give more effective policy related to this, or could we talk about the culture of the people in this river basin, how people think about the ecosystem service, and it might, do you think that it could impact to the way they use water, and from your opinion, which is the best solution that we can make people to think about other people before making any decision on using water?
Well, okay, there's more expertise on these things. Everyone on here, including yourself, by the way, has a solution or a suggestion or identifies a constraint. Governments change, personalities change, and policies change. Science is important, but it's not the only thing that's important. I mean, many of the problems are social and political and economic, and a call for more science. We have to know more about the water, a few more decimal points about groundwater availability, or that's not the core of the problem in many places. So it's a way for politicians to say, I don't want to answer that. Let's get more science. And I'm not going to believe that science either, so we'll always need more science. I think in your group, you talk about the Congo and the Amazon basin, and you've got the Jordan and the Middle East. You've got answers and that are not applied. So I once wrote a paper on desertification after 5 years of studying it, and I said, they got the solutions. Why do they need more science? They know what they have to do. So it's why solutions are known but not applied. And that's a key factor that should be part of any project, So in theory, we can solve all these problems. In practice, we can't. And that brings in humans. So the call for more science may be appropriate, and the call for more science may be a deterrent to addressing the issues. So I fall back to the Congo, and a very interesting cluster of people. Sorry, Hop.
Thank you. Time for one more question. Does anybody want to unmute yourself? And I see John Negru has posted a comment about Fragile Planet. You want to say anything about your experience, please?
Sure. Thank you, Asim. I'm the publisher of Mickey's Obor Bree book, and we're just about ready to publish another book by His Holiness the Dalai Lama about the environmental crisis on the Tibetan Plateau. And a lot of the book has to do with the watershed issues that Dr. Glantz is addressing, and particularly saying this is why mountain people deserve the same social justice attention as the ocean folks at the other end of the H2O cycle. A lot of what Mickey has been saying reminds me of Timothy Morton's notion of hyperobjects and the difficulty of dealing with particularly climate change as a hyperobject that extends far into the future, far beyond our personal spatial understanding, and kind of stretching our cognitive abilities right to the max. So I really appreciate, Mickey, that you have talked about the bridge between that philosophical outlook and the social policy implications of what it could look like. So it's not really a question, it's just stating this fact. I'll also mention that the Office of Tibet in London, England, is hosting a conference at the Royal Geographical Society on June the 23rd the title of the conference is The Tibetan Plateau, Addressing the Third Pole Climate Crisis. And of course, a lot of that is about the same water issues that Mickey, Dr. Glantz, I call him Mickey because he's my cousin, is addressing. So if you're interested in participating in that event, if you go to the Office of Tibet's website in England or the Royal Geographical Society's website, you probably find the appropriate links to figure out how to participate in that event. So that's what I'm going to add.
Thank you very much, John. I see Senator Nisar Memon has a question. So please, this would be the last question for Mickey.
Yes, thank you very much, Asim. I must say, Mickey, congratulations for an excellent presentation. I think this is something that has been missing because you have really connected the mountains right up to the ocean. This is extremely important, was very much needed. And we have been talking in the last meeting also, if you all remember that. I think your one of the few charts, the first few charts that you mentioned about the entire central to the whole thing was the people. I think that has been, in my view, been missing in all of these dialogues and all of these knowledge forums and everything. And we should encourage that, let us say, when we have various basins treaties that are going on, of course, the treaties are always made between the governments. But once they are there, then I think the people, whether they are from the downstream or from the upstream, from the oceans or from the mountain, they should be closely involved. And this is exactly what we are going to do today, discuss the second part of the today, the B questions that we have. So I think perhaps the need is there to bring, how to bring the people, the community into not only first in the decision making and then implementing the decisions that have been taken, because that will increase the trust and will improve the understanding of who's affected. And then we can even talk about rising above the narrow nationalism that is always there. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Mickey, you have any response to either John or Senator Memon's comments?
I agree with everybody. I mean, there's so much expertise on this right now webinar. I'm not used to webinars. I mean, I'm not teaching or whatever, but anyone can contact me. Again, you'll have my email and I'd be happy. And I've worked on the Congo. I've worked on lots of the places they're talking about, and I still have deep interest. And this was the first time I even mentioned the word that I might retire. So please don't tell anyone. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Mickey. You don't have to retire until we have in-person meeting next year, hopefully. So we'll hopefully be able to meet you in person. So,
sure.
So thank you so much. I mean, I just want to move on and kind of like want to get to the questions, but just wanted to introduce very quickly our Highlands to Oceans proposal that was inspired by this work that Mickey presented and that's been going on, I mean, across in the last 100+ years of research in human environmental sciences, geography, earth system science, political science, and so forth. So that kind of like was the inspiration for our work. And that's how we've been in the Transboundary Watering Cooperation Network. We have launched this Highlands to Ocean initiative, and we are working on various components of that. So I just wanted to kind of like set the stage very quickly before we get to the questions. I know we're running a little bit behind the schedule, but I think it was important discussion that we started. So I just want to like point out that we are looking at it, as Mickey just pointed, like anticipatory governance of hydroclimatic regime shifts in transboundary basins, and we want to work with the people. So in this sense, like we are like looking at not only the dams that are being spread up across highlands to lowlands, but also what are the distribution of ecosystem services and how they affect, like across different countries, what happens. So as mentioned, like this is in the Indus Basin, originates from the Tibetan Delta, as well as the Mekong starts from there. But the entire basin-wide models and understanding of like how these highlands to oceans interact with each other, that is still lacking in many, many ways. And some of the ways that we've been trying to understand that is by looking at these, how interconnected, what Mickey was talking about, like everything is connected with everything else. We're looking at it more systematically from the scale perspective, that how climate change, different regimes, or like what we're talking about, like the seasonality that comes from El Nino patterns, how do they affect the hydroclimatic regimes in these river systems, like whether we have in the midlands or lowlands, whether we have dry, normal, or wet weather, and what happens to the climate change effects of the glacial regimes, how that changes the seasonal availability of water, both fresh water, clean, or like in not just the water quantity, but also water quality is implicated in this as well. And we are also very much interested in looking at the people part, which is in here is, like how many ecosystem services are being provided from these fresh water in the form of like hydropower, not only provisioning like irrigation or fishing, but also like non-provisioning like cultural or recreational ecosystem services. And what is the demand for this, whether that is being met or not under these different seasonal patterns, and how would people respond when those are not met? What are the migration patterns as sea level is rising, coastal communities are moving up, or as glaciers are melting and mountain people are moving downwards? What is the source of conflict? How we can anticipate that and stop that from happening? So this anticipatory governance versus reactive governance, both at the subnational, national governance levels, but also at the transboundary governance levels, like whether there is cooperation, stalemate, or conflict, all of those governance factors are in policy control, in our control, and we can work to trust with others, both upstream, downstream, or lowland, highland cooperation. So that is where the science diplomacy, as well as environmental diplomacy broadly defined, is very critical. So in this project, we are looking at like not only understanding these impacts of these climate change and ENSO regimes on these highlands to lowlands water system provision of ecosystem services, how does that is affected, but we're also looking at like how we can transboundary governance regimes, whether they're cooperative or conflictive, and whether the subnational national policies are anticipatory or reactive, how they can affect the provision of aquatic ecosystem services, and the models and the data and environmental monitoring and science can help us understand that and visualize that, and also build early warning, early action systems that could be useful could be mainstream in our planning and governance systems to avoid the worst case scenarios. So that's been our major focus of our project, looking into these, also like the benefit transfer mechanisms from lowlands to highlands or international treaties, how we can improve them based on our anticipatory understanding of this. So from anticipation, we meet like when we take the action today, thinking about the present, like engaging with the future, but acting in the present. That's what we mean by anticipatory governance. And it could include different ways to conceptualize future, not only just like scientific, probabilistic, and planning-based approaches, which are here, rather also like more multidisciplinary, more co-production of knowledge, community-based knowledge approaches that include participatory scenarios, also early warning, early action systems, both plausible, pluralistic, and also action-based approaches where citizens can take the action. So that includes citizen juries, deliberative mapping, all of these approaches, visioning exercises, as well as we need to think about not only planning and building capacities, but also mobilizing and interrogating those and reflecting on where we are and where we need to go. So in that sense, we've been working with this kind of like boundary object of building these integrated models, highlands to oceans. And we have started working on various components of this. So for example, Dr. Ibrahim Mohammed, who's part of our twin network, recently he's in working with NASA on a nature conservancy project, and they've been able to model the integrated model that can simulate both the glacial and land use and ENSO patterns onto like using satellite data sets and predict what's going to happen in the lower Mekong Basin, given the dams and all of that, the spatial distribution of the water. But the point that I want to make is that these models can be built exactly, but we need to use them in a way that would actually change the situation on the ground. And also these models need to be validated with field data. So that's where the science diplomacy and cooperation is needed. Right now we are working on a GLOF2. This is the Glacial Lake Outburst Flooding project that has been funded by Green Climate Fund, UNDP, to various agencies in Pakistan for the upper Indus Basin. And we have a subcontract from Pakistan Met Department and UNDP working on building a glacier and glacial lake inventory using very high resolution sentinel data sets to predict the monitoring dynamics of glaciers and glacial lakes in the upper Indus Basin. And again, in our research, what we have found is that even the existing inventories, like high mountain Asian lake inventories, they also need field validation. So a lot of these scientific models can be built using satellite data sets, but at the same time, they need to be validated and communities need to be engaged who are at the risk of glacial lake outburst flooding. So there needs to be a people-centric early warning, early action that needs to happen. But we need to bring this knowledge in a transparent and communicative way and make it useful and communicate the early actions that need to be taken by vulnerable communities as well as policymakers. So just knowing about the deforestation in like, say, for example, this study uses satellite data to predict or monitor or track the deforestation in the Amazon region, which is like the Amazon is here, but you see that these red regions where the deforestation is happening and it's creeping in, as Mickey said. And also a lot of the other, like in Africa, for example, sub-Saharan Africa, there is deforestation happening in the lower Mekong Basin here, further up in the Indonesia, Malaysia part, in the tropical regions. There's a lot of deforestation happening, which is going to have a lot of like adverse effects on the overall water regulation systems. So how do we, it's not just about monitoring, it's like about converting that knowledge into there are significant gaps in the design and implementation of basin-wide water security, early warning, early action systems. And that's where we need to think about how we can build scientific cooperation to advance this work. That is not just scientist to scientist, but scientist to people as well. So these are the three questions that we're going to talk about. The first question is, what are the gaps in transboundary watershed monitoring and water security early warning, early action systems? This is also on the white paper that we have circulated in the Google draft. And I invite you to please add in suggestion mode your comments directly there, but also in the chat mode, and we can have a discussion about it in the remaining time, starting with question number 1. Question number 2 is linked with it. It's like, how can scientist cooperation be promoted within and across transboundary river basins? And how can indigenous knowledge and wisdom be integrated with scientific knowledge to secure clean water? So I'm going to stop here sharing, and these questions are maybe, Ben, you can post them in the chat as well. But I invite you to start the conversation, and Susan, I'll have you give it back to you, the floor for moderation. I'm sorry that we are behind our schedule in getting to these questions, but I think we should just discuss all 3 questions. Whoever wants to, since they were circulated in advance, if you have any ideas, suggestions, comments, please, let's have a discussion about it. So thank you.
Thank you, Haseem. So let's begin with the first question. I think Mickey and Haseem both set us up very well particularly for the first question. So what are you seeing now that the gaps are in transboundary watershed monitoring and water security with early warning, early action systems? So what are you seeing in your communities or in your work, or what you've read about that are the gaps currently in understanding the transboundary water monitoring currently that's going on? Would anyone like to start off with any responses to that?
I think I see Senator Maimon's hand. I don't know whether that's previous or the new.
Yep. Is that Senator Maimon? Did you want to?
Yes, thank you very much. I think, first of all, I must say that this Dr. Asim Zia's presentation really is answering today's session that we are talking about, because the science has to be there. And in fact, some of your questions are also been answered there. For example, what is the first question that you had was, there is a problem of data exchange. It is withheld. If we are talking the transboundary, then the data may be there in one country and the other, but it is withheld, obviously for the political reason and sometimes for the security consideration. Now, and there could also be the priority is given to the national objectives rather than over the legal requirement. For example, transboundary countries may have the treaty, but then the priority, instead of sharing the water according to the treaty, it could be given to the national objectives over the legal commitment that they may have. The lastly, third point that I have is the national research that is taking place is sharing the data is not coming out to the communities. It may be there in the same country, but transboundary communication of the research is not there. For example, if there is a early warning system, for example, like you're working with the PMD that I see, and PMD has already done in the Gilgit region. They have installed the early warning systems, and I've seen them. And those are the ones, but they are limited to the country. Transboundary, it is not communicated. Now, that to me is one of the issues that we are talking about. The national research and information about the equipment and everything is related to the local communities and not transboundary. So this, I would say that it is also because there are no joint projects and there are no jointly funded projects, nor they are jointly managed. In fact, that becomes also the solution, I would say. And there are also the absence of the networks for the exchange of this timely data. For example, if NASA is doing it, then fine, there should be, you need to validate from the ground data. Now, there are the limitations which could be resolved by way of those networks that you need to create. And I think that is one thing that we will come to the question number 2 when we talk. So that's all from me on the question number 1. Thank you.
Thank you. It seems like what Senator Memon's bringing up is how, for those of you, which I know many of you are involved in your communities with science, your own practice as a scientist, but also with other scientists and the communities that you're working with. So how well do you see the science being translated to local communities? I mean, is there a gap there between the scientists and what the local communities understand in terms of monitoring? Saeed.
Yeah, so I think, definitely there is a lot of gap, what is being created by research institutions, or even, let's say, studies commissioned by the government. For example, last year I visited Chitral, so some part which have been affected by glacial outburst falls in the past in 90s. So there is kind of some research activity going on, but local communities do not have kind of any knowledge. Is there any kind of prediction being made out of that study? Or what's the current state of glacial lakes or glacial melt? So from that perspective, I think it also becomes a very important issue for transboundary water management, because there is a lot of glacial melt, and the data about the glacial melt and its contribution into river runoff is kind of first not very much known, and second, it's not shared with kind of other countries who share the same river.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Sandra.
From my experience, when we talk about transboundary in the transboundary area, for instance, between Colombia and Ecuador or Colombia and Venezuela, what they understand as transboundary is just an imaginary line. It can be a bridge, it can be a river, but the idea of transboundary zone, it is usually in the treaties or in the maps of the central government. So when we try to realize what is science in this area, my suggestion is to get out of the box and just to imply that we don't need to bring all the people together, or that the river basin scale is not the right one to build environmental peace building in the region. So maybe it's a new approach that I am doing now, but what I'm doing this is just to exploring with kind of governance networks they are in the region, and to try to bring us a fragmented nodes or groups that they are working because they have similar interests. So it's a better approach than just to think that they are following some science or policy directions that in reality, in some of these regions, they didn't exist at all.
Thank you. Larry.
Thank you very much. In relation to the question that you just asked in particular, our local communities, is there uptake, is there mutual learning back and forth? What has to be avoided, of course, is fly in and fly out. And I'll give you two short examples from my own work in the Okavango River Basin. Is one, we had a multi-year project on managing ephemeral river basins. And there was a lot of citizen science, traditional ecological knowledge, plus sort of Western science. And that was engaged and iterative, right? So it wasn't just we went in there with some rapid appraisal or whatever, but we were engaged over years with the local communities, and there was a lot of hard work to be put in there. The second example is while I was at the Okavango Research Institute, the Swedish SIDA for many years had sponsored a kind of mobile environmental education entity. So there was through Okacom, they had a vehicle and they went up and down the river, and it was kind of a two-way education from the, in terms of indigenous knowledge and Western knowledge over time, and it was structured around other kinds of community activities. So it wasn't just strictly doing science; it was doing trust building and community liaison and things like that. So my two messages there are, engaged and iterative, and, you have to go to the people. They often lack the mobility, and we have to go to them.
Thank you. That's a very important point. Anyone else want to comment on your own experience with what's effective in the communication between science and local communities?
Can I jump in, Susan?
Yeah, absolutely, Claude.
I want to just also from my own work, I think one of the issues is that we need to acknowledge the various power imbalances that exist, in a transboundary context. And the earlier points that were mentioned about a lot of this information being at the hands of the national institutions, I think is quite a common issue in the various basins in which we're looking at. To think about more of these connections between what the national governments are doing and their connection or even awareness to what's happening on the ground and vice versa. So that's one issue that I think we need to explore. And the second one is, again, even at the community level, different communities have different capacities, different accesses to data, different accesses to education, the ability to communicate, and of course, the different political contexts in which communities find themselves also depends on to what degree they can actually be proactive, in going out and monitoring, for example, or looking at what the issues are and making their issues, relevant to the policymakers. I know my work in the Jordan River Basin, there are huge power imbalances between Israel and Palestine, and also more broadly in the Middle East. There's a lot of mistrust in sharing information and data. I think a huge issue that I would be very interested to hear from others in other basins is if we develop these sort of like transboundary community-based networks. This was also mentioned earlier by one of the participants. We need to think about, how do you unify methodologies? So, if on one side of the border, of a political border, which of course makes no hydrological sense many times, but on one side of the basin, a certain methodology is being implemented, and on another side of the basin, a different methodology is being implemented. So unifying methodologies, coming together to say, without a, for example, how do you understand, surface water flows or groundwater flows if the monitoring or methodology is being done at the different levels are not being harmonized. So I think that's an important point to also bring into our discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Clive, if I may jump in, and also this relates to Sandra's and Senator Maimon's comments about the network and collecting the data at the field across the boundaries, right? So for like, say, we are getting a lot of data from satellites that could be used for like observing what's happening across the boundaries. Like we can use Sentinel data to see exactly what's going on in Kashmir or in Palestine or in the conflict zones in say, Kabul. I think that, but the problem is that for the water quality, like say when we want to build these water quality early warning systems that can actually have more accurate, like high resolution prediction that would be actually useful, that would not have a lot of uncertainty associated with it. We need to have like a field, like a stream level data that is used to validate those model outputs and validate the early warnings that are generated. Those like then actual monitoring needs to be cross-validated against the early warnings to see that actually what the forecast was made for drought or for agricultural drought or for flash flooding that actually happened, right? So some of those could be monitored through satellites, but some of them requires us to go to the field level. So, but there are a lot of these national security kind of like languages or in the treaties that constrain the sharing of these field-based data sets. But what we have seen is that where you are getting at is, it seems to me that with the community science and citizen science-based approaches, let's say, of course, community science and citizen science by itself has these issues of we cannot, there might not be uniform standards that could be taught to everybody to measure and like say, take the water samples in exactly the same way. But we can train community scientists to kind of like maintain these water quality sensors in their communities. And then those water quality sensors could then be, because they are uniform, those are like technologies which are cheap technologies. So if we're like doing manual collection of the water, that could have the variability because people might collect them not following exactly the lab guidelines. But with these sensor deployments, I think there's a lot of large opportunity to do that, but we need to have community buy-in for those kind of like sensor deployments. So, but that would overcome this challenge of kind of like the variability across different communities of like, they're not following the uniform science standards. But my question is like, say, do you think like this community science-based approach would be resisted by the security intelligentsia as well? Or would that be a concern that we should be concerned about? Or is that like something that we can just go and do it under the radar as kind of like a science project?
Clive, do you want to respond to that?
Yeah,
I think in my case, I think absolutely there's a lot of risks from the national level in what we are doing. Again, I think each basin will have its own, unique context. So I can just talk from my perspective in the Jordan. There is resistance at the national level. So again, it's all about how do you navigate through these things. One thing that we're trying to do in our basin is to develop joint. When we talk about water quality specifically, it's very much about what are the water quality standards. So specifically when we're talking about reuse, which is something that we're very interested in developing. So Israel has water quality reuse standard, Palestine has a water reuse standard, Jordan has a standard, but they're all different. And and so the question is, again, it's back to that point of harmonization. How do we develop regional standards? So it's all great, if you're going out there and monitoring the water, but to make the information meaningful, leading it to policy one way is, well, what's the standard? And so how do we get, and the standards are really what is the role of the governments, right? So that's where you have this track 2 or track 1, track 2, or track 1 and track 3 kind of level, right? So we can go out and monitor, we can gather the information, but to transfer that into meaningful policy, which hopefully then have a positive ecological impact, it's what's the standard? Whose standard are we going to be using? Are the governments able to come together and say, let's discuss not national standards, but regional watershed-based standards?
Yeah, thank you. I see Senator Memon.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is a very sensitive issue. As you mentioned it's a security issue also comes in. And I think one of the ways that it can be resolved is that a declared form of joint funded, jointly organized program should be there. So it does say that the transboundary communities will be involved. It should not be something that the scientists are exposed to. There should be declared intent to do it, and that this will be funded by the international, known international agencies. And it could be done in the following way. For example, a scientist in one country be supported to do the research in his or her area, while the other scientist in his or her area. And those are the ones which will be, they can bring it together, and that could be brought in at the level of the state and at the level of the government, that this is how the other side has done it, and this is what this side has done it. Now, this is one way to really approach. So never try to surpass it. The moment you do that, I think you will get the, as I just saw the Rani's comment, that you will expose the communities. And those communities are very, I would say, weak to withstand any such pressure. Now, having said this, I think data, there's another dimension to it which is really the answer to your B3, is that when scientists are working, then those scientists in country A should go to the local communities and say, this is what we have done, and what are you doing, and what has your centuries-old practice has done. And then combining that and then making research known and published that involves, as we said, the people are involved, the communities are involved, their intelligence is involved. So science and the community intelligence is involved in bringing that. Once that is done, it is for a country A. Now the question is, the similar thing can be done in a country B, and that is for them. And these are the scientific papers that are published. These are not the political ones. But remember, these are the papers which will become part of the track 1 at one point in time. It has to be, because from track 3, you move to track 2. And now when we're talking on the track 2, you must move it and have a plan of action, a sensitive plan of action to move to the track 1. I think there is a way to do it. But remember, it has to be an international funding, which is very much above the board, known as to who's doing it, rather than kind of without knowledge. Thank you very much.
So just a quick kind of question, Susan, I'm sorry, but the international funding is like, say, we have been going after, like, say, like NASA or National Science Foundation, or we're also planning to go after, like, say, World Bank's Global Environmental Facility or Green Climate Fund, funds or Adaptation Fund. I mean, those are on our horizon, which I think would be recognized as legitimate. But that's very, very competitive to get. At the same time, like Susan has been talking with some people who are doing like social impact investment, and we're going to talk about it in the next week. But maybe there is a possibility for those investments to also be done at a transboundary scale where we can follow uniform standards of scientific research. That might be probably also legitimate, right? So,
yes,
okay,
agree.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Yes, I see a hand up. Please go ahead, Bowmans.
So I'm listening to the conversation on how to standardize the evaluation process of what's happening. But I wonder if thinking out of the box a little bit, we can actually have the models. We're all looking at the same system, but we use all a different value system to look at it. And how far can we use the models to output outcomes in like different value systems, so different people can look at it in a different way from their perspective, and that should actually then lead to better trade-off management, like an optimization between the different value systems, rather than trying to box everything in one value system from the start. So just a thing to think about.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think unless there's something else, we'll move on to our second question. for the sake of time. And I just did want to bring up again, I think what Saeed had brought up at our last meeting, this idea of shared responsibility, and Bindu and Asim talking about knowledge production that Clive's already also talked about, and also our last speaker about standards and addressing value, particular value systems. So if we were really to think about what does a shared responsibility look like across, track 1, track 2, track 3, but also the knowledge production, I just think it might be worth us really identifying what this criteria for shared responsibility looks like in terms of the translation and communication to this, to each of our different river basins for the future. So just something to think about. Okay, the second question, how can scientist to scientist cooperation be promoted within and across the transboundary river basins? Are you seeing that actually there's great cooperation between all the different scientists? You've brought up, the different methodologies being used, and that's problematic. What are you seeing scientist to scientist in your own work? Is there conflict there, or is there in general cooperation? Larry.
Yes, thank you very much. Several brief observations here. One is 20 some years ago across Southern Africa, now stretching up as far as Kenya, we created WaterNet, which is a teaching and training and research arm for sustainable integrated water resource management. And that brings together people from state civil society, private sector, and the scientists on a regular basis, and has really, I think, is a model for how you build a sort of a shared sensibility across transboundary contexts. But the difference there is that the Southern African political context is very different than some of the hard cases that we've been talking about otherwise. A second one then is like, the low politics venues. So, the Nile Basin Initiative and things like this, basin forums, I think, are really useful places to get scientists together in what you might call to practice corridor science. Sometimes they say at formal meetings, the real action is in the corridors. So corridor science, where you can get people together in some kind of a structured space at a scientific gathering or at a forum of some kind. I think that works quite well. So those are some examples that I have directly.
Great, thank you. Sandra.
Hi, I have been seeing Michael Glantz several times in several events in Latin America. And he knows that working in Latin America between scientists is very difficult. There is a lot of competitions and there is very fragmented. What we have been doing, in my view, what I have been doing with the Colombian scientists is we are trying to not to compete, but to get into the same objective. For instance, we are building up the construction of the new concept of water governance because the Colombian government is very interested to do this from the territories. So I said to them, well, I am just also working in water governance in the transboundary. What we are not doing something together. And because that good results, we are duplicating these actions in the transboundary area between Colombia and Venezuela. So my point is that always is difficult, but is you trying to find some common grounds with the scientists. You can just not negotiate, that is not my way, but just to do a kind of trade-off where both parties, they are going to get some benefits at the end. So not get so involved what the benefits from Colombia is, because it, from my opinion, is just the central government interest, but also to see what your benefits are and how you are going to replicate in your own benefit. means my local objective. So that is my strategy so far. And I must apologize because I have a transboundary water course now running in another screen, so I have to disconnect from this screen. So we will see all of you in the next meeting. And thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for joining us. Anyone else would like to comment on this topic? Dr. Mohanty?
Of course, thank you, Susan. In fact, in my knowledge, like last 15 years, I'm working this region like HKH, Hindu Kush, Himalaya. So we are actually working with several universities and governments. But when impact of science, we share data, information, whatever we get from the all transboundary region across from the Tibetan Plateau, where I have working with the Chinese Academy of Science. Even India, we have some institutions like Solini universities, and we have Central Water Commissions and IMD. Then we have some university from Pakistan like Kamsat. We have across the line, we have some kind of collaboration. And in fact, we have a consortium called HUC, Himalaya University Consortium. So there is a need of research and information and science-based model that could be shared and acknowledged among the scientists and researchers and professors like us. When we talk about various issues like what transboundary water sharing and all, and when there is some kind of heavy rainfall or snowfall in the highland Himalaya, particularly Tibetan and Tibetan Plateau, this region Himalaya. So we somehow reluctant to share the information because there is some kind of stress. And the government, we have to take the permission to share our universities, other countries. So we have to have some mechanism where the knowledge could be shared properly and timely. And the early warning that previous speaker talking about, we have a mechanism of sensor-based early warning system that very successful in Afghanistan, particularly they mentioned about the Hunza Valley in the Afghanistan. They have many parts like Kandahar region and Helmand region. There is a very successful model because frequently there's a flash flood and gloves. So we have see how the information could be bring to the the people, communities who are living in the downstream. So it could be very useful. And even we have acknowledged, because last 3-4 projects I'm working with the Himalaya, particularly Nepal, there is several activities. We see there is a probability of glove, then we evacuate the communities downstream. So we have to have information, knowledge, and satellite-based data that could be very resourceful, useful for the people who are in downstream. So in my point, when we do the research, particularly I have 2-3 publications with UCL, University College of London, and other countries. So so we find and we share the data and information whatever we have, and it could be useful for the community. That is very important. So there is a need, although there is a gap, we have to have some kind of mechanism, as Memanji has mentioned. There is a make like government some kind of initiative. We should share there is when there is a requirement. So I hope it could be managed through the large-scale fundings, as well as some kind of all government, inter-government interactions, inter-university interactions, inter-community interactions. So these were very best practices, and academia and various projects.
Thank you, Dr. Mont. Yes, the idea of the shared communication and how to get this to be really effective among all of us seems a really important point, and hopefully something that we can do in the future.
I would like to add only one small point here in this question, B2, is that whatever we have been talking about, several friends have talked about, I think this is going to help build the trust for acceptance of what the benefit sharing has to be brought in. The principle of benefit sharing versus dividing the water. I think if we keep this in our discourse, in our discussions, then I think it will create the trust, and the trust would lead to the, again, I will say, track one. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, I want to make sure we have time for our third question, which I think is also a very important question, which is how can indigenous knowledge and wisdom be integrated with our scientific knowledge to secure clean water? So what are you seeing in your basins, or what have you learned about this communication between the indigenous knowledge in our communities in communication with scientists and the scientific knowledge? Somebody like to start us off with that? Richard Carroll.
Hi. It's been very interesting hearing everybody's different experiences. There's a whole story in the Congo Basin that a joint basin-wide commission called the Congo Basin Forest Partnership and a ministerial body that manages a joint plan, a regional plan for the Congo Basin forest. It's about 40% of the forest in conservation landscapes that was put together back in the early 2000s, and it's been operating and producing a report from each area and overall for the basin, dealing with various topics, including water quality, but mostly deforestation. There's not the detailed monitoring that I know of out there in the Congo Basin now, but it produces a joint state of the forest report annually that addresses all the various topics across these 11 landscapes across the Congo Basin. Now, this started as a ground up program working with communities, put together into transboundary landscapes and into a regional program. And currently, so it's gone from local to regional to global. It's all funded by USAID and NORAD. So there's a joint funding scheme and data collection and reporting system that's joint across all these landscapes across the basin. Now we're going again a bit further into depth in the landscapes, going back from the local to the regional to the global, back to the very local again. And in DRC, the Democratic Congo, we're helping to implement a program of local community conservation concessions. And that's the work that Go Conscious Earth is doing, where we're working with specific communities over pretty large surface area well, we're in one of these landscapes. There's other NGOs and other partners working in many other landscapes, but working directly with the communities to help develop simple management plans. What is your knowledge? How do you use your resources? What's important to you? What needs to be monitored here over time? How can we support the communities, and how can we support the community's activities in these conservation concessions? And this is a program that's across DRC. We're working in this Laktumba landscape with Go Conscious Earth, but it's a program throughout DRC with a similar system of data collection, developing management plans for the communities, helping to implement both development and science and monitoring in these various communities across DRC.
Great. Thank you, Richard. So we only have about 3 more minutes left before we wrap up. So Richard Friend, if you could be brief, and also Larry, we'll wrap up with the 2 of you.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the chat to the video, but I mean, there's very good experience in the Mekong of communities that conducting their own research and leading it themselves. So this isn't sort of scientists going in to promote community research. This is communities mobilizing against state-led infrastructure, hydropower dams that were legitimized partly through production of environmental impact assessments. So the politics of knowledge of how science is mobilized to support particular development agendas is really significant if we're thinking about how we're going to influence change. And really the perspective of this network, it's now just over 20 years old, of villagers setting up their own networks within tributaries of the Mekong, training other villages in other parts of the wider basin across Thailand, into Laos a little bit, into Cambodia, into Myanmar as well, is, I think, very significant. And then, you know, the dynamic between scientists and researchers changes. And I'll just also point out that, you know, some of the things that they've come across, that they've identified, were initially denied by the Mekong River Commission, by the sort of the state scientists. For example, unusual water fluctuations and the sort of transboundary migration of fish was really undermined and challenged. Eventually, you know, there was much of the evidence that, sorry, I'm trying to find this link. Much of the evidence that was created by the village researcher was then taken up and was verified. Sorry, let me just put this link in the chat, and I'll
Okay.
stop at this point.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Richard. And Larry, just very
Right.
briefly.
Thanks. To be brief, I think it depends in terms of local knowledge. I think it depends what we're talking about and where within a basin. So the more practical, I think you see a lot of local input. You know, in terms of urban areas, you'll find flood management, small scale irrigation, forest management, small scale fisheries. You know, those things. There's a lot of local input, but as you scale up, I think the local knowledge disappears, both practically, you know, hydro projects that Richard just talked about, and conceptually, you know, nexus and stuff like this, where that's where we tend to find local knowledge disappears.
Great, important point. Thank you. Okay, so Asim, I'm going to turn it over to you to kind of get us ready for our 3rd session next week.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your active participation. Please, I know we didn't have the time to continue to discuss these questions. Please use suggestion mode on the Google link that I've sent to continue to add your thoughts and reflections based on the conversation. But also, if new ideas come in, please add as much as you want to. We are trying to synthesize it as we go as well. So next week, we'll be on 24th at the same time, 8:30 a.m. We'll be moving to track 1 diplomacy, polycentric governance, and multi-level governance challenges, both in terms of transboundary governance and treaties, as well as subnational and national level policies for that are being actually implemented, and what we can do to improve those for water resource, water security challenges, given what we face. So thank you so much again. And, we'll be seeing you next week, hopefully. And that would be our concluding session as well. So thank you. Have a great day and great week. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
And Mickey, thank you so much for waking up early.
Thank you, Mickey. Thank you so much for your presentation.